Hi, everyone. Welcome to Differentiation for Teachers. My name is Cássia Venezuela. I'm a teacher at Faculdade de Cultura Inglesa, and I'm very happy to be here talking about differentiation with you guys. When you think of differentiation, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Because to me, it's always been diversity. And when I think of a diverse classroom, we can think of different ways in which classrooms are diverse. Students sometimes, even though they are in the same school year, they could be different ages, or maybe they're the same age, but one simply grows up quicker than the other, or students have diverse attitudes in the classroom, which is what I decided to portray with the pictures. So you could have those that prefer taking notes. You can have those that are more outspoken. They have no problem talking to the other students or talking to us. You have those students that prefer to observe. They don't want to participate so much. They just want to see what's going on, but they're still paying attention. You could have a diverse classroom in terms of people's personal characteristics like race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. So all of that is diversity. But there's also diversity in the way that people learn. I want to make a disclaimer at the beginning of this course, which is I'm not going to be talking about multiple intelligences. Maybe you've heard of a book by Gardner called Multiple Intelligences. It was very popular in EFL and it was very popular like in the 90s. But what happens is that we don't really have enough evidence that multiple intelligences is a thing. We don't have evidence that some people have like a visual brain and some people have like an oral brain, or some people learn best when they're doing things with their hands. What we do know is that you can teach your brain, you can train, better yet, you can train your brain to learn in a certain way. So most of us, those of you who are Brazilian, have been through a schooling system that is extremely visual. So I studied in school during the 90s and the early 2000s, and there was a lot of copying from the board. I needed to read a lot what the teacher wrote and copying my notebook. So up to today, when I'm studying, I feel that I study best if I read and then I write. But that has nothing to do with my type of intelligence. It has to do with the kind of schooling that I was exposed to, right? So we're not going to be talking about multiple intelligences, okay? This class is based on the work of Carol Ann Tomilson. She's an expert on differentiated instruction. She's an American teacher, researcher, lecturer. She contributes with this very cool site called edweek.org, and she graduated in the Virginia University, and she also has worked there for a period of her career. And most of her career was in regular schools teaching children. So sometimes the examples that I'm going to give you from her book are about that context. Basically, I used two of her books to prepare this session, How to Differentiate Instruction in Academically Diverse Classrooms from 2017, and Differentiation and the Brain, How Neuroscience Supports the Learner-Friendly Classroom from 2018. All right. So let's think about what needs to be diversified in a classroom. When I think of a classroom, the first thing that comes to mind is the kind of task that we propose to learners. So I have two tasks here, and I would like you to tell me, or not tell me, but think about what is the difference and what is different and what is similar between these two tasks. So the first task is use this space to draw what diversity means to you. And the second task is carry out a survey with the people sitting next to you. What does diversity mean to you? So as you can see, both tasks require that the person who is performing the task reflect about diversity. But the first one is going to be more introspective, and the second one is going to be more communicative, right? So one way to approach differentiation is to variate the road that students take to get to the same reflection. But not always it's going to be possible to you to provide students with two tasks in the same lesson, because that could be time consuming. So what could happen is that sometimes you propose two different tasks in the same classroom. Sometimes you propose only one task, but you make sure that you alternate between tasks, like sometimes something that is a little bit more introspective, sometimes something that outspoken, outgoing students are going to feel more comfortable with, because the introspective ones are not going to feel so confident with the second task, right? It's also important when we're considering differentiation to think about the input that we provide our learners. So basically, we can provide oral input or visual input. When I think of oral input, I'm thinking, of course, about us, the teacher, talking. I'm thinking about listening passages that can come from a course book, and I'm thinking about authentic sources of oral English, like, for example, a vlog, like a video, YouTube video, or a film. When I think of visual input, I think a lot about course books. I think a lot about authentic texts that we can propose for learners to read. But I also think about pictures. We don't really I don't. I'm not sure about you. But sometimes we don't think about how pictures are actually visual texts that can tell a story. So they can maybe help students uh, better understand the context of a lesson or even the text that they are reading. So it's important to think about how can pictures support a lesson, right? But when we think of the classroom, it's not only input that is going to be differentiated. Oops, sorry about that. I skipped a slide. It's also output. And what's most important about differentiating output is that sometimes you are going to have students that need more support to produce, and some students who are going to need less support to produce, which is related to their fluency level. So for example, if you're performing a speaking activity with your learners, maybe some of the learners are more comfortable if you write a framework of the dialogue that they have to perform in the board. Some of them are going to be comfortable not using that framework. So you could even ask these students to sit with their backs to the board. That could be a possibility. All right, so now that we've considered input and output and how we can think of different kinds of input, we should always strive for bringing differentiated input and output to our learners. Let's think about the four essential ideas that need to permeate our differentiated instruction. All right, so the first one is that the environment in which students are asked to learn must invite learning. That means it has to be safe and supportive, but it also has to be challenging. So lots of research from different authors. For example, Alzabel, he's an education psychologist. Also Dornier, who works with motivation. They talk about how there's a excellent motivation point that we need to reach in our classes. If students are not very motivated, then they are bored. If they are too motivated, if they are too engaged, maybe they can get anxious. So there is an excellent point of motivation that we need to generate in our classrooms. And that comes with bringing, I feel, one of the things that helps in that is bringing differentiated types of material of input. So if you use the video today, tomorrow you could try a text, or if you used a writing activity today, tomorrow it could be a speaking activity with or without the script. Or if you always give them the script, maybe bringing something maybe proposing a speaking activity in which they don't have a script. So all of that can help you to provide diversity and making sure that the environment is challenging. Something else that Carol Ann Tomilson, so I forgot to say this, but these 4 essential tips or 4 essential points in differentiation are from her book, How the Brain Works. So she says that a teacher should be able to clearly delineate what constitutes essential knowledge in a content area, in a unit, or in a lesson. So we should be aware of what is essential for students to understand that area, unit, or lesson, and what is extra. And sometimes students are only going to walk out with the essential, and that's okay. I would say this is one of the most important ideas that I'm going to share with you in this course. Another thing that Tomilson says is that we should constantly and persistently assess how close students are to that essential knowledge. So for example, your objective is for students to write a narrative text, and you considered for their level, maybe they are B1 in CEFR, so they are intermediate, that the essential knowledge for an intermediate student to grasp or to produce when they are writing a narrative text is the good use of narrative tenses. But there's other things that students need when they are producing a narrative. There's also time expressions like when or at the time. There are expressions to show surprise, like, for example, suddenly. Even when we think of narrative tenses, because narrative tenses are composed of simple past, past continuous, and past perfect. But maybe you considered that the really essential ones, the ones that they have to include in their narrative, is simple past and past continuous. So we should always try to assess, meaning if the narrative is our content, we should always try to assess how close students are to that delineated essential knowledge. And of course that this topic is related to assessment. So Tomilson always mentions in her books that when we assess students, we should do something with that information. That information should feed the next instruction. So if a student is showing us that they still haven't understood that narrative texts are broken down in paragraphs, because he's writing his text in a whole block of text, like without a paragraph, like just one big long paragraph. I consider that to be more crucial for a narrative than the narrative tenses. So if the student is showing you that, you have to go back to that and remediate that. So how can you show your learner that narrative texts have to be broken down into paragraphs, maybe showing them some examples or like asking them to write and then giving them feedback on their text. So assessment is all about collecting data to understand and to plan the upcoming lessons, because maybe we discover that there are still some needs about the past content that students need to focus on, or maybe you can skip, you can accelerate some things because they are already showing they are okay with that content. All right, so these were the 4 essential points I would say we have to consider to plan a differentiated lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to do some differentiation together. So we're going to try to understand the essential knowledge in 2 pieces of input, a text and a video. And in the subsequent lessons, we're going to look at differentiated instruction for ensino infantil, ensino fundamental, and ensino médio. I am very happy to be here with you guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye.